black boxes are authentic.
There was a high suspicion in a lot of quarters that the Russians or the Soviets had tampered with the tapes or had made bogus tapes. And so we had to 110% validate the authenticity of the tape. They had seals on them. They had, I remember, wax seals on them. The photographs were taken, the seals were cut.
Investigators confirm that the CVR handed over by the Russians is the same box that was installed on Flight 007.
They opened them and looked at them and validated the serial numbers, validated the model numbers.
Now that they know they have the right boxes, investigators need to make sure they have not been tampered with. Suspicion soon arises.
During the cleaning process, they noted that there had been some breaks in the tape and had been spliced by the Russians.
It is not uncommon for a tape to break during the impact of a crash. But distrust of the former Soviet Union runs deep.
First, they examined these areas of the splices where it had broken, and they did that on this high magnification photograph. One of the techniques that the French had that I hadn't seen before, that wasn't used in the United States, was a photo analysis machine. They could do this with this optical high magnification. They could actually see the magnetic waves.
The test confirms that no data was added or removed from the cockpit voice recorder when it was spliced together.
565, what was the altimeter again?
Finally, investigators can listen to the tape, confident that every word is authentic.
What? It's already time for breakfast.
What do you know?
Let's eat later.
But all they hear is idle banter from the crew.
I heard there's a currency exchange at the airport.
What kind of money?
All the Korean money.
It's in the domestic building.
There is not a word on the tape to suggest the crew was on a spy mission.
Just a totally routine conversation, and either these guys are the most cold-blooded actors and falsifiers ever, or they really were totally clueless about where they were. Sadly, I think the latter's the case.
It seems unlikely that KAL-007 was on a spy mission, but it was caught flying over Soviet territory. Investigators have long suspected that the crew either misprogrammed their navigation system or left it in the wrong mode. Set on constant magnetic heading, the flight data recorder finally provides the definitive answer.
The data revealed that the aircraft was on constant magnetic heading from soon after takeoff from Anchorage to the end. There was no deviation whatsoever in the magnetic heading.
The crew of KAL-007 never activated the waypoint navigation system.
Gear up.
Landing gear up. Now passing 500.
It seems they simply forgot a basic step in their standard flight procedure.
The INS was functioning properly, had been loaded properly, and was counting along the route where it was thought it was supposed to be. But the autopilot was not following the INS commands. Instead, it was following a compass mode.
So it's only telling them where they're supposed to be.
Investigators learned that even though the plane was following a compass heading and not the waypoints, the computer would have continued to display their intended waypoints even though the plane was nowhere near them.
Korean Air 007, position over Nippy, estimating NOCA 1826132.0.
This may explain why the crew never noticed their mistake. The crew also didn't notice a key indication that they were badly off course.
We're experiencing an unexpectedly strong tailwind.
How much of a tailwind?
35 knots, 040.
The fact that they were experiencing completely different weather patterns to a plane supposedly minutes behind them should have alerted them to the problem.
Now, there's a point where you see him teetering on the brink of realizing something is horribly wrong. He's talking to the pilot behind him, and the winds are almost 180 degrees apart, and there's a pause, and Chun is somewhere in his mind, as he's a pilot, and he has the instinct, this is odd. Is it a clue to something I should look into? And he doesn't. And at that point, he might as well pull the gun out and put it to his head.
It was human error. A complacent crew in the middle of the night had their flight computer on the wrong setting, and then didn't notice they were straying off course.
Everybody makes mistakes sooner or later. Good pilots make mistakes. Not so good pilot makes mistakes. We're all making mistakes.
When investigators combined the conversation data from Flight 007 with intercepted Soviet transmissions, they get a detailed picture of what went wrong on September the 1st, 1983. The pilots believed they were on course. But 3 hours into the flight, their magnetic heading took them into Soviet airspace over Kamchatka. The Soviet military had been tracking a US reconnaissance plane.
There was a real American spy plane. It was there. There were two planes that looked alike. When KAL penetrated the border, the perception was that this was the plane.
As the passengers sleep through their long journey, the Soviets scramble fighters to intercept the plane.
The identity of the plane was just not known. The clues that it was a lost civilian airliner, well, might have been there. The clues that it was 135 didn't add up, but the Soviets involved didn't have time to think it through.
Target traveling at high speed and approaching border.
But the fighters are not fast enough. The plane leaves Soviet airspace and continues along its heading to Seoul.
They figured that they'd just been spooked, but that was all over. Unfortunately, for everyone involved, it wasn't.
The airliner is just seconds from flying over the island of Sakhalin.
So Sakhalin was prepared.
KAL Flight 007 enters Soviet airspace for the second time.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll soon be serving breakfast before we land in Kimpo, which will be in about 3 hours.
Target traveling at high speed and approaching border.
Target is on your heading.
I can see it both visually and on the screen.
Major Gennady Osipovich, the lead fighter, makes visual contact with Flight 007.
Give warning burst with cannon.
But the warning shots go unnoticed.
Take up position for attack.